Greetings, everybody. My name is Derek Sloan, and I am the Member of Parliament for Hastings, Lennox and Addington. I am very honored to be joined today by Dr. Byram Bridle from University of Guelph, Dr. Patrick Phillips from Englehart Hospital, and Dr. Don Welsh from the University of Western Ontario. These esteemed individuals will share their stories with you shortly, and I hope you have many questions to ask them. But first, I wish to make a brief statement. As many of you will already know, I have been among the most outspoken of all Canadian politicians with my concerns towards the way the federal government, in addition to our provinces and territories, have responded to the pandemic. Whether it was never-ending lockdowns, the curtailing of constitutionally protected rights, the extreme measures taken against Canadian small businesses, or basic concerns about informed consent and vaccination, mental health and deferred medical procedures that have caused a cascading effect on our health system. I've consistently stood up for Canadians when no other federal party would. Those of you watching this today may not be aware that several weeks ago I issued a call for whistleblowers to our medical and scientific communities across this country. Doctors, nurses, medical scientists, and other experts have indeed reached out to me through various channels to tell me their stories. At times, the information they've provided has been shocking. However, the single uniting factor was that none of their stories were being told either here in Parliament or in our national media. In fact, these individuals are being blocked at many levels from telling their stories. And since Parliament is about speaking the truth and the needs of the people, what more fitting location and fitting time than here on Parliament Hill to do this today? One of the first whistleblowers to reach out to me was a concerned nurse who has spent over 20 years working in a hospital in my riding of Hastings, Lennox and Addington. For her own protection, I will not name her today. When she reached out to my office, it was to inform me that the local hospital she worked in was experiencing very low numbers of COVID patients. That is, until they took in many patients from Toronto hotspots, which artificially raised the number of COVID patients in our community in a way that was not accurately reflected in the local media reports to the public. It made it look like locally we had a lot more active cases than we truly had. This type of fear-mongering in media reports has been a major issue of concern throughout this pandemic. Even worse, this nurse informed me that many of the sick patients had in fact already been vaccinated. This was not something we were hearing from our local health officials in local media reports. Even worse, this honest and diligent nurse was afraid to say anything publicly because the College of Nurses of Ontario was threatening nurses who spoke out with what they were personally witnessing in their hospitals. Anecdotal stories such as this came in with several frontline medical professionals reaching out to me with each passing day. It gets worse. On the whistleblower file, things drastically changed on April 30th, 2021. The College of Physicians and Surgeons of Ontario, known as CPSO, issued a dire statement threatening any doctor who spoke out about what they were witnessing on the front lines of our hospitals, in their own clinics, and in our communities. The purpose of governing bodies like the CPSO is to protect the public, not to stifle legitimate scientific inquiry or dissent by professional doctors. But this attempt to intimidate doctors into silence had the opposite effect. My office was inundated with calls of concern. At the time, we began working very closely with multiple groups of doctors and other concerned medical professionals. These honest and hardworking doctors are fully galvanized against the regressive authoritarian overreach of the CPSO and other similar governing bodies. I'm going to share a couple of stories that have been shared with me from medical professionals and ordinary Canadians, and then the doctors here today will share their perspectives as well. The first note surrounds vaccination from an individual who can't share her name due to potential job repercussions. And her words to me are, Derek, I am a 30-year-old female citizen of Winnipeg who was recently pressured by healthcare workers and the media to take the COVID vaccine. I was told that the benefits outweigh the risks, but I now realize that I was never informed of any of the potential risks. 4 days after my first and only Pfizer dose, I was diagnosed with heart inflammation and fluid buildup around my heart. I'm now on anti-inflammatories for 3 months that have the potential of injuring my only kidney. And she adds, I was born with only one kidney. The media keeps saying that these cases are rare, and that they typically happen in young men. But so far, she says, I know 3 other Winnipeg women who have also developed heart issues post-shot. And she notes that we are all young, under 35 years old. Well, this is all concerning, she goes on to say. The most concerning part is that we are still being advised by our doctors to get a second dose. At this point, it feels like they are purposefully trying to harm us. The second note I received comes from one of our honorable members of the Canadian Forces. And again, I received so many notes, I couldn't go over them all, but I picked a few to share today. I want to thank our members of our Canadian Forces for courageously doing their job, and for this particular member for sharing this note with me. Good morning, Mr. Sloan, he says. I am a CAF member who fundamentally believes that Canadians are being misled and taken advantage of by our government institutions. I feel it is my obligation to contribute to the betterment of our country and the safety of our citizens. As of Friday, my COC is boasting a 90% vaccination rate within the CAF. This was achieved by the following requirements. Number 1, CAF members are required to complete the DLN course before having a vaccination appointment scheduled on their behalf at a mass vaccination clinic on base with staff, other CAF members, and PHAC, Public Health Agency of Canada officials. Number 2, all members are required to attend the clinic regardless of their personal wishes to receive the vaccine or not. Upon arrival, members are seated and given a 2-page briefing document which summarizes the information in the online course. Members are then ushered one by one into cubicles and asked if they wish to receive the vaccine. A PHAC nurse is on site to answer any questions. The member is free to leave after a 15-minute period of observation. In my experience, he goes on to say, I felt that both times I went to the clinic that I was being pressured and encouraged to blindly accept the process. On my second visit, which was much more aggressive, I was directed to speak with the public health nurse who advised me that I was not authorized to obtain the vaccine from civilian sources and that the vaccine was in short supply and that it was just like a flu shot, which would have many follow-up booster shots. I asked the nurse when the vaccine would be licensed in Canada out of interim use authorization and was stunned when she knew nothing of the actual process. I am concerned for my fellow members, he says. I have witnessed my coworkers suffer vaccine injury in the past, and am sure that the military will cover up the true devastation caused, as it has done before with suicides. There is talk that the vaccine will be mandatory for all CAF members in November. My solemn plea to you is that this is somehow prevented. We are currently being told to be leaders and take the vaccine, and if this happens, it won't be long before all Canadians will be subject to mandatory vaccination. Thank you for your time, a scared CAF member. So I've shared a couple of private notes with you to me from Canadians involving their interactions with health professionals and institutions. As you can see, we should be asking questions about this process, but whenever someone does so, they are intimidated or censored by whomever it is that they're reporting to. With that in mind, it became clear that I had to convene a summit today to tell you personally and directly about the censorship several doctors are facing here in the country. And these doctors that are with me today are indicative of many, many more doctors. And I've spoken with dozens and dozens of them personally, and I'm certain there are hundreds of doctors and scientists across this country who are facing extreme pressure and censorship for asking legitimate scientific questions. Many people at high levels across the federal and provincial governments are misleading the public. And the media must now hold these officials accountable for their lack of transparency and honesty on these matters. In these troubling times, I thank you for being here today. And all I can say is God bless Canada. Thank you so much for being here with me today. Dr. Bridle, would you tell us your story here at the front? Thank you.